Welcome to What's Next, the podcast for disruptors in the federal government and Department of Defense who are shaping the future of digital transformation. With a new administration setting fresh priorities and technology advancing at breakneck speed, the stage is set for an unprecedented era of innovation. Change isn't just inevitable, it's an opportunity to reimagine what's possible. Each episode will bring you front row insights from visionaries driving breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, cybersecurity, data strategy, acquisition at the speed of innovation, and beyond. Discover how they're turning challenges into opportunities and building the foundations for tomorrow's government. This is more than just a podcast. It's your roadmap to navigating transformation in 2025 and beyond. Ready to explore what's next? Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode of What's Next, where we dive into the future of innovation and transformation within the Department of Veterans Affairs. Joining us today is Jeffrey Neill, the Executive Director of the VA Technology Acquisition Center. As a driving force behind the VA's technology procurement modernization strategies, Jeff shares his insights on what's next for 2025. From advancing partnerships to streamlining acquisition processes, we'll explore the key initiatives shaping the VA's path forward. Stay tuned for this engaging discussion. So Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited about this third podcast that we're doing with you to continue our discussion about what's next for 2025. And this particular podcast and topic will be all about the VA's acquisition gateway, or the use of the acquisition gateway to be able to share information, forecasts with the community, with industry. So can you tell us a little bit more about the acquisition gateway and what's next?
No, I'd be happy to share that, but let me start with a little bit of backstory for how we ended up where we're at right now. I've mentioned a number of times that I started with VA in the TAC, the Technology Acquisition Center, last October, and became the acting director and the permanent director in January of this year. And I've had a lot of conversations. Other members of the leadership team of the TAC had conversations with industry and internal stakeholders about, what we're doing well and what could be improved. And the most common thing that we received from industry in terms of what could be improved was we don't understand what's next. We don't really have eyes on your procurement forecast. And the way that procurement forecasts have been delivered in the past for the TAC, which I would say is not unusual in the federal government, is it's an occasional conversation. So if I attend a conference and I'm presenting at a conference, on that occasion, I will talk about what's next in terms of what are major programs that we're procuring for maybe over the next 6 months. And so that's a very intermittent and inefficient way of communicating. Now, we do have ways within VA already to communicate, but I found through feedback from industry that they really liked the 15-point scorecard produced by TSC, and if I get their acronym wrong, I think it's the Professional Services Council, if I'm not mistaken. And they do a scorecard of all federal agencies, and VA did poorly on the scorecard. And the scorecard more or less is comprised of 15 different areas. Things like, the name of the program, the magnitude of the effort. Is there an incumbent? If so, what's their name? When will you be soliciting? A lot of these general fields would be found on the scorecard. And internally, I told the team, this is the number one feedback, number two being transparency and communication. But the number one feedback is we're not communicating what's in our procurement forecast, except occasionally. And that makes it very difficult for vendors to work with us because they need to make decisions about will they bid or not? What will they do in terms of their teaming arrangements? They probably need to do it ideally, 18 months in advance. And we're very often giving them maybe 3 to 6 months in advance. So it dissuades people from participating. And I heard this over and over and over again, and people pointing at the scorecard as maybe a greater understanding of where we could be improved. And I challenged the team internally in the TAC what can we do? What's available to us that's appropriate, doesn't duplicate anything that VA is trying to do, and doesn't diminish anything that VA already does? What is possible for us to improve this process and try to give a better understanding to industry about what's on the horizon, what's going to be procured so that they can be better prepared to participate, right? They hold together the best teams, they can make the best strategies possible. It's really a win-win for everybody involved. So what can we do? We just need to provide it in a better way earlier. And we looked at a couple of different ideas. And the one that came through in terms of ideas to help improve on the forecast is that GSA already does this in something they call the acquisition gateway. And it hits on all those 15 categories. Many agencies participate, but not all agencies. Some organizations within VA already participate, but not very many. And simultaneous to us looking at GSA's acquisition gateway, we had a conversation with GSA about how difficult would it be? Could we meaningfully participate in that? And it seemed very achievable on our side. And then also contemporaneous with that is we have someone who sits on an innovation group with OMB. And they discussed how the acquisition gateway is a best practice. And in the future, there are plans. We don't know if they'll be fully developed and materialized, but there are plans potentially in the next couple of years to mandate that federal agencies move their forecasts onto the acquisition gateway with GSA. So we thought at worst, we could be an early adopter for VA and try to work out some of the details so that other sister organizations, other contracting organizations in VA could perhaps learn from our experience. And so we could hit all those areas that we think could make the forecast more beneficial to industry. It's on an existing tool that does that in a way that industry is appreciative of, and also makes us more of an early adopter or leading edge organization with respect to what the overall federal contracting community is trying to do. So that's how we ended up and looking at the GSA acquisition gateway. And initially, for those who've heard me speak on this topic in other conferences and events, I initially set a very humble goal that we would try to do 4 forecasts wherever we were going to do it, because at that time I didn't know where we would do it. And we would do it once per quarter and twice in the third quarter, because the third quarter is the most pivotal quarter for getting work out in terms of getting participation from industry. That's just when a lot of things are presented to us to procure through the end of the year. Now we have gone from we're going to do it 5 times, once a quarter, twice in the third, is now we're going to do it on a weekly basis. And so we started at the beginning of November, and unfortunately we haven't hit every week. Sometimes we run into technical issues with GSA, but that is our goal, and we have been able to generally stay within a week or two of our last forecast. And I challenge the team, let's get as much as we can on here. Let's learn about the process and get better at it, and add more and more fields that may be missing from our data sets internally. And let's look at ways that we can produce the data so that it can be added to our existing forecast, so that every subsequent forecast becomes more refined in the sense that we're better at giving you the information we gave you last time, but we also try to give you the information that wasn't present in the previous iteration, so that it evolves very quickly, so that maybe throughout the year, there will be an appreciation that we went from, well, we migrated that information onto GSA Acquisition Gateway, and then we improved the quality of it dramatically throughout the year. So that's how we ended up on that. This is our goal, is to take things that have been presented to the contracting organization, a request for procurement assistance. That's data that we have possession of, and we take that data and try to fit it into those 15 categories, which also align to what GSA is doing. And we're trying to get better and better and better at it. And hopefully, if it isn't obvious where we're failing and where we need to improve, feedback about where it could be improved, appreciated, because we can in those 15 categories and what we're doing. But I'm sure there'll be things like the terminology may not be accessible to everybody. The government is very reliant on acronyms and certain in-house sort of terminology to reflect things. I'm sure that we'll have to improve upon that area, but there will be others that are just not at my grasp, and we need that information. So hopefully, Susan, that answers your question. We intend to use that acquisition gateway as a way to improve industry's knowledge about what we're procuring, but in a way that has been benchmarked to excellence based on, nonprofits like Professional Services Council, and is already existing and also aligned maybe with the government's long-term plan in terms of hosting their procurement forecast.
That's
Yes.
excellent, Jeff. That's very exciting. So people can see what's happening coming up, not in the next 3 to 6 months, but as you said, 18 months out. Jeff, how would you like to receive feedback from the community about the acquisition forecast and what you're working on and the future direction of the VA TAC in terms of on the acquisition side of the house?
Well, I hope to work with GovTech Connects to sort of take that information, maybe in response to this conversation that you and I are having, and we can work together to try to efficiently manage that communication. But there'll be other opportunities. We're going to have the APBI. I'll make myself available. Other TAC leadership will be available. So we'll be presenting, but at the same time, I spend a lot of my time networking and talking with people to have those one-on-one conversations. I'll certainly take a meeting. Anybody wants to talk about it, provided that, I have a limited total number of meetings that I could ever accommodate. But I have found that I haven't met my capacity yet. So I could talk to them about that. They could communicate it to proxies. If there's a group that could represent their views. So if that's FCA, if that's MVSBC, they can communicate on a broader basis and represent their community of vendors. We're going to try to make communication more efficient, but we have to allow really for the diversity of how it can be communicated. So we can do it on an ad hoc basis. We can do it occasionally at different events. And I would like to work with different groups so that they can provide the perspective of the people that they represent. And so if you represent, for example, service-disabled veterans who work in this space, I would highly encourage you to set up a meeting with us, and we will hear your feedback with respect to that. And maybe we can even partner with them in the future to facilitate that, in addition to anything else that we think we might be able to partner productively with them about.
That sounds great. And Jeff, in closing, is there anything else you'd like to share with the community around the Acquisition Gateway and what's next for 2025?
Yes. Right now, the goal is to get out to about 18 months overall in terms of our forecast. Right now, the data that is in the forecast is procurement requests that have come to the Technology Acquisition Center. What that means is, if you look at the life cycle of a project, we are further along in the project, and now it's been presented to us to procure that piece of the project, right, that isn't going to be performed in-house, for example. So we are further along, and so our horizon is probably closer at this time of year, maybe 9 months at the most, but it could be shorter, like maybe no more than 9 months on that. And it's my desire to add other engagements internally within VA, like a quarterly strategy board and conversations with our customers here, the programs that we support, to give a longer horizon on that, because the 6 to 9 months that we're putting out now is good, and it's a significant improvement upon what was done in the past, but it is not optimal for industry. So we need to look at not what is more concrete and being procured presently, but we need to include the things that are more speculative and planned, although they're not certain, right? But they are, let's say, in the strategies and plans for these programs, so that they can make engagements with those programs and try to learn more about them, influence perhaps the best technical solutions for our veterans, something that people try to do at this point in the stage when it's with the TAC, when it's actually more appropriate for the development of the requirements before they are transmitted to the TAC, so that we can support and help them and shepherd them through the procurement process. So right now we've got more or less 1/3 of the information that we hope to add. So we have all the information we presently control. We want to add a longer horizon of information in the future that we're working on, and hopefully we'll have included by the end of the year. And then there'll be a piece of it that not planned, not currently requested to be procured, but can be anticipated. So if I know that an acquisition, we have a current contract and there is no acquisition to replace that current contract, now that's maybe in nobody's plan. I don't have a current request to procure the follow-on contract, but I can anticipate that will likely materialize at some point. So we're going from very concrete, we have it, we're actively procuring it, to this is what is planned and this is the strategy of these organizations, to I don't know, they don't know, but it seems likely that it could be included at some point in the future. And I think between those three areas, when we have gotten them together with the appropriate caveats, not everything is as certain as different categories are, then I think we'll have provided the best that we possibly can to help industry get prepared and be able to influence the technical solutions and hopefully get the best quality solutions for our veterans. So all three of those pieces are integral. And I'm sorry, that was a long answer for really maybe with something to be appended onto our conversation here. But I just want everybody to know we're really just sharing the information we have, and we'll have to generate additional information, and we'll have to do some analysis and provide that in as well. And those are basically, version 2.0 and 3.0 of our forecast.
That's great, Jeff. And Jeff, you mentioned at the end of the year. Is that the end of this calendar year, or is it the end of FY25?
The end of the fiscal year. So that'd be the end of September of next year. And our process here, Susan, just to let you know, we have a number of things that we're trying to execute based on feedback that we've received. If it becomes apparent to us that we can't execute it, or we're not able to execute it at the quality that we think industry and our veterans and our partners deserve, we'll pull that back, and that will be readdressed as we get a little bit smarter and better at it next year. So we're going to try to do the best that we can on these things. So those three pieces I mentioned, it is our goal, but hopefully you can see that's very ambitious, that we're trying to piece together those three aspects of a procurement forecast. And we know that we possess the first piece, which is the data. And I feel very confident, being that we already posted it on GSA's Acquisition Gateway. The other pieces of it, more and more speculative, more and more reliant on our customers, the programs that we support, our partners, to share that information with us, and hopefully they share it at a high fidelity, so that what they're strategizing, what they're planning is in fact what ultimately gets procured. So I just want to caution everybody, these are our goals, but they say no plan survives engagement with the enemy. So the enemy in this case is reality. So as we roll through our plans, we may find that reality is as accommodating to our plans, and we'll just do our best and know that if we can't get it done this year, that just means that we will try again next year. And we're committed to an iterative improvement process here in the TAC.
That's fantastic, Jeff. Thank you so much for sharing the information about the Acquisition Gateway, your plans for what's next during FY25, and ways in which industry can engage with you. And what we'll do is we'll put up a survey at the end of this podcast so that people can click. And if they have any recommendations for you or for the VA TAC, we'll make sure that they have the opportunity to include those, and we'll share those with you as well.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing here in TAC. I appreciate the future feedback. I'm already appreciative of that because I know we rely on it so heavily. And we're very invested, Susan, to make this a conversation. So you and I had a conversation today about what we're doing, and I hope that I'll have those conversations with all the participants in industry and also internal within VA about getting it right so that we can produce the best outcomes for our veterans.
That sounds great, Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this important information.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to What's Next, the podcast that brings you bold ideas and actionable insights from the leaders shaping the future of digital transformation. As we step into 2025, the pace of change will only accelerate. But with the right vision and strategy, we can turn disruption into transformation and possibilities into progress. If you're ready to lead, innovate, and inspire, stay tuned for more episodes. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and join as we chart the course for a smarter, more connected future. Until next time, remember, the future belongs to those who don't just adapt, but innovate. Let's build it together.